about some of the times in my life where I just did not like where I was, or the times in my life where I wish I could have been some other place. And I thought of maybe three examples. One is I was like maybe 13, 14 years old, and I worked for a farmer here in Lexington. And he had planted corn, and it was feed corn, so you let that dry on the stalk, and then after it's dry, then he would take the tractor, and he would be on the tractor driving. My brother and I, we would be on each side of the tractor, plucking the corn and throwing it into the trailer that he was pulling. Well, this particular field had what is called cockleburs in it. And these cockleburs, I don't know, they're about the size of an acorn, and they're spiky, just full of spurs. And so we would go from one end of the field to the other, plucking the corn and throwing it into the trailer. We'd get to the end of the row, and there would be all of these cockleburs all over us, under our arms, on our arm. I mean, we would have to stop at the end of the row and pull off hundreds of these cockleburs and throw them down on the ground. And then we'd turn around and we'd go through it again on the next row. And at the end of that row, stop and get all of those cockleburs off of us. I mean, it was terrible. And I can remember doing that, and I kept thinking, you know, making 50 cents an hour, I just don't think this is worth it. And I wish I wasn't here, but I've committed to it, and I'm going to suffer through it. And finally, after about a third of the way through the field, I think the farmer felt sorry for us, and he saw everything we were going through. He said, guys, we're just going to quit, and I'm going to hire a combine to come in and finish this field up. Oh, talk about being so grateful that a terrible experience had come to an end. I think of another time when my dad had promised a widow that he would go underneath her house and put the insulation back in place where different workmen had come through and pulled the insulation down when they were working under her house. Of course, my dad didn't like tight spaces, and the scuttle hole was so small, I'm not sure he could have gotten through it. And so his idea of him doing it is him going and standing there at the scuttle hole and watching me and encouraging me as I did it. And I couldn't, there was only about maybe 2.5 feet between the ground and the top, and I was scooting along on my back, pushing up insulation, and it was hot, and I was sweating, and I kept thinking to myself, why in the world am I doing this? I just need to get out of here and tell my dad I can't do it. But I kept thinking, no, this is a commitment. I promised I'm going to do it. And finally, I was able to get to the end. And then the last one that I think about is when I was on the highway patrol, I went to a Clemson ball game. And it was, we left where I was assigned about 4 a.m. in the morning to head to Clemson. And it was about 45 degrees. So I'm thinking that even though it's 45 degrees, that, it's going to warm up as the day goes on. So I don't worry too much about taking my hat, or not taking my coat or anything like that. And so I go to this assignment, and I did not check the weather report. And what I didn't know was 45 was the high of the day. And a cold front came through. And I was out there directing traffic without my coat on. And my hands got so cold that whenever I went to direct the traffic, that my fingers were curled in and I could not straighten them up. And I had to direct traffic in this kind of way whenever I was out there on the road. And I made up my mind that day that I don't care if it was the 4th of July, the next time I went on a special assignment, I would take my coat and gloves with me. And when I got home from that assignment, I got a material bag, a cloth bag, and I put a coat in it along with my gloves, and they stayed in the trunk of my car until I retired. So each of these assignments, I learned something through them. I found myself in a place where I didn't want to be, didn't know how to get from where I was to where I wanted to be, but through each of those, I learned something about life. Well, my name is Richard Coleman, and I'm the pastor at Shepherd Church of the Nazarene in Lexington, South Carolina, and it's great to spend just a few moments with you today. I think about Moses and his life. Moses had been the prince of Egypt, and he one day made the decision that he was going to kill an Egyptian guard that was beating an Israelite. When the king found out about it, he was going to have Moses arrested, and whatever the law applied, he was going to have that happen to Moses. And so Moses took off. And so now Moses has gone to another country. He went to Midian. He no longer has all the grandeur of being the prince of Egypt. Now he's having to become just a shepherd, just a lowly job, trying to get by and figure out what in the world is going on. Life went on for Moses. You know, it's only a couple of verses between where Moses goes into Midian and then whenever God speaks to him, but many, many years go by. Matter of fact, the scripture says that during that long period, so it lets us know that a lot of years passed. There were things that happened in Moses. Moses got married. Moses had children. I mean, Moses had a life, but he was in a place that he really didn't want to be. He was there because he was running. He was there because he was hiding. I guess in some ways we could call this maybe a dark period in Moses' life. Well, there was a couple of things that happened during that period when Moses was leading his life. And one of those was the king of Egypt died. So the king that knew about what he had done, the king that wanted him arrested, that king was no longer in the picture. And so that allowed things to change for Moses in the long run. The other thing that happened was the Israelites that had been in slavery for hundreds of years, they had gotten to the place where they finally came to the realization, hey, this is a bad spot to be in. We don't want to be here. And they started crying out to God. Would be a whole nother sermon, I guess, about sometimes how God allows us to get into places in our life where we realize that we do have a need for Him. That's where He allowed the Israelites to get, and maybe even allowed Moses to get there. Give Moses time to maybe learn a few life lessons, to learn, to get a little maturity on him, to learn what it's like to be a father that cares about his children. All of the lessons that Moses was able to learn during this time in Midian. So how does that apply to us? I think it's easy for us sometimes to maybe get into that area of life, maybe where we've never been before, maybe where we really didn't want to go, and we're just thinking, why would God have me here? Why is God leaving me here? You know, why has God let me suffer through this for this amount of time? And I don't know what that time has been for you. All I know is that in our story about Moses, it says during that long period, God had an answer for Moses, and God was preparing Moses for a great work. Even though it might not have been God's will for Moses to do the things that he did and get over there into Midian, but God was able to know that he was there and make a new plan for his life and prepare him for what was coming. And you know, I'm confident that God can do the very same thing in your life. So if you're asking yourself, why am I here? What's going on? Why has God forsaken me? Don't give up. Put your faith and your trust in God and realize that He's making a plan for you. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you. May you truly look up to God during the darkest times of your life. Thanks for viewing today.